On the night map of the Earth, there is a strange band of light running across China. Tiny chains of lights link Beijing with Shanghai, Guangzhou with Wuhan, Xi'an with Lanzhou, like blood vessels pulsing inside a giant body. But that is not a highway or expressway. It is made of steel tentacles, high-speed trains rushing at 300 kilometers per hour, carrying millions of people every day. The question is, why China? Why not the United States, the country of Ford, Boeing, and the interstate highway system? Why not Europe, home of the TGV, ICE, AVE, where people have been talking about taking trains instead of planes for decades? And yet, in less than 2 decades, China alone has built a high-speed rail network stretching for tens of thousands of kilometers, accounting for the majority of the world's total high-speed rail length. From a country where slow, overcrowded, always late trains were once normal, China has turned itself into a kingdom of bullet trains with a dense network, enough to connect every major economic region at home to reach beyond its borders. This isn't just a story about engineering and concrete. It is a story about state power, development strategy, geopolitical ambition, and the price that comes with all of that. To understand why China has the largest high-speed rail network in the world, we have to go back to the beginning, to a single trip by Deng Xiaoping, 2 long-term plans sketched on paper, to the shock of the 2008 financial crisis, and to a kind of addiction to infrastructure as a growth stimulant. Imagine you are a normal Chinese middle-class worker living in Chongqing, but constantly traveling for business, meetings, and visiting family between Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing. Instead of fighting your way through airports, doing security checks, and dealing with delays due to storms or fog, you simply go to the station, scan a code, step onto a white tan blue train, put on your headphones, and take a nap. A few hours later, you wake up in another city 1,000 kilometers away, almost without feeling the shock of the journey. To outsiders, that network looks like magic. But for China, it is the result of a series of very cold-blooded choices, pouring national resources into infrastructure, accepting that local government debt will balloon, prioritizing construction speed over political debate, and treating high-speed rail as a weapon of development rather than just a transportation system. The story often starts from a symbolic moment. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping went to Japan and stepped onto the Shinkansen. For a leader coming from a country just emerging from the Cultural Revolution, that white train gliding smoothly past Japanese fields was a picture of a future China did not yet have. From that moment, the idea began to take root. One day, China must have this, and it must be bigger, faster, and longer. In the 1990s, as China's economy accelerated, the weaknesses of its old railway system became painfully clear. Passenger trains were slow, many routes were single-track, freight trains were prioritized, and the average speed was only a few dozen kilometers per hour. Meanwhile, interprovincial expressways and domestic airlines mushroomed. If nothing changed, the railways would fall behind and become the choice of the poor. The Ministry of Railways launched speed-up campaigns on the old tracks, upgrading them so conventional trains could run at 120 to 160 kilometers per hour, but that was only a warm-up. The real turning point came in the early 2000s, when Beijing approved mid- and long-term railway network plans. Those plans outlined a national high-speed rail network with backbone corridors, first for vertical and for horizontal axes, later expanded to 8 vertical and 8 horizontal, connecting clusters of megacities from north to south, east to west. The initial target was tens of thousands of kilometers by 2020, and that target kept being raised as each new line opened and created momentum to build the next one. When the Beijing-Tianjin high-speed line opened in 2008, cutting the trip between the capital and the port city down to about half an hour, it was not just a new route. It was a declaration that China had truly entered the high-speed rail era, and from that point on, things would move at a speed few Western democracies could tolerate. Then the global financial crisis hit in 2008. As exports stalled and the real estate bubble had not yet fully inflated, Beijing needed a money-burning machine big enough to stimulate demand, sustain growth, and keep tens of millions of people employed. High-speed rail was the perfect candidate. You can pour hundreds of billions of dollars into concrete, steel, electrical systems, signaling equipment, tunnels, bridges, and still call it investment for the future. In that model, we start to see the first part of the answer. Why does China have the largest high-speed rail network in the world? Because it has a highly centralized state, capable of drafting a 20 or 30-year plan, mobilizing enormous capital from state banks, bonds, and local governments, then executing construction at the pace of a giant worksite. Most of the capital for high-speed lines comes from state-owned banks and financial institutions, plus a large share of bonds issued by the Ministry of Railways, with the remainder contributed by local governments. But money alone is not enough. The second reason lies in how China bought time by importing technology and rapidly localizing it. In the early stages, Japanese, German, French, and Canadian companies provided the technology and designs for the first generations of high-speed trains. Instead of reinventing the wheel, Beijing signed a series of technology transfer contracts, paying royalties but requiring assembly inside China and gradually increasing the local content of components. In less than a decade, Chinese companies were able to design and manufacture new generations of trains that were almost entirely made in China, running commercially at 300 to 350 kilometers per hour on trunk routes. The third driving force is geography and population. Few places in the world have as many densely populated urban corridors as China. Beijing, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Hangzhou, Ningbo, Wuhan, Changsha, Guangzhou. The distances between these megacity regions are usually in the 500 to 1,500 kilometers range, too far for comfortable car trips, too short for air travel to be truly efficient, but perfect for high-speed trains running 250 to 350 kilometers per hour. Europe has similar corridors, but each route usually crosses several countries, and then you run into different regulations, political priorities, and public opinion. The European Commission keeps having to publish new visions for 2040 and beyond, hoping to one day complete an integrated continental high-speed network from Berlin to Copenhagen, from Lisbon to Madrid. Meanwhile, the total length of high-speed rail, all of Europe, still lags far behind China. In the United States, a country built on cars and airplanes, rail has long been neglected. The old railway system focused mainly on freight, while passenger transport has been stuck in a century of interstates and cheap domestic flights. To this day, the US still doesn't have a true high-speed line that meets the same standards as in Europe or Asia, even though the debate has raged for decades. For Western viewers, that contrast makes looking at China's dense network even more shocking. The fourth reason is political and social. For Beijing, high-speed rail is not just about faster travel. It is a tool to stitch together a vast territory with sharply uneven levels of development. When a high-speed line opens between a rich coastal metropolis and a poorer inland province, it sends a message: the state has not abandoned you, and you have a chance to reach new jobs, services, and markets. Provinces and cities also have strong incentives to fight for a high-speed station. A station on the planning map can trigger the rise of a brand new urban district, shopping centers, hotels, industrial parks. For local officials, it is a chance to show achievements, boost GDP figures, and improve promotion prospects. And to secure that station, they are willing to co-fund, borrow heavily, and clear land at a speed and intensity that would be hard to imagine elsewhere. Of course, behind that speed are darker sides. The 2011 Winchu accident, when two high-speed trains collided on an elevated track and dozens of people died, was a shock that rocked public opinion. It raised uncomfortable questions about safety, corruption, and construction quality. The railway minister at the time was investigated for massive bribery. The system came under scrutiny, and maximum operating speeds on many lines were temporarily reduced. But unlike in many countries, that shock did not kill the high-speed rail project, it only slowed it down for a moment. After about a year of review and adjustment, investment ramped up again, the network kept expanding, and images of white trains gliding smoothly across long viaducts once again flooded television screens. At this point, we can summarize: China has the largest high-speed rail network in the world because it combines three conditions that few other countries have: a centralized state that can force projects through to the end, a geographic and demographic structure that fits high-speed rail extremely well, and a historical moment when infrastructure investment was used as a long-term economic stimulant. But that is only half the story. The other half is about consequences and cost. First, we have to admit that this network really does serve millions of people every day. On busy corridors like Beijing-Shanghai or Guangzhou-Shenzhen, high-speed rail has largely replaced domestic flights, easing the load on airports and cutting travel times for journeys of more than 1,000 kilometers down to just a few hours. Some routes have even reached the point of breaking even or making a profit on operating costs alone, if you temporarily ignore the enormous upfront construction costs. For many inland cities, a high-speed station is a new gateway to the rest of the country. A business person can go from Wuhan to Shenzhen for meetings and return in the same day. A student from Lanzhou can go home for Lunar New Year without enduring a grueling day-long slow train. When the cost of time goes down, the flows of people, capital, and ideas move faster. From an environmental perspective, if trains are well loaded, high-speed rail can reduce the number of domestic flights, and CO emissions per passenger kilometer are usually lower than for airplanes. In a country that has struggled with air pollution, climate change, and carbon neutrality commitments, this is an important piece in the puzzle of greening transportation. But the financial cost is huge. Many lines run through sparsely populated areas where passenger numbers are low and ticket revenue cannot cover interest and maintenance, let alone initial construction. The debt burden of railway companies and local governments has swelled constantly, at the same time that China must deal with a real estate crisis and slower growth. In some cases, simply having a high-speed line has raised borrowing costs for local governments because investors see higher debt risks. In some regions, the model of land-feeding rail, using land sales around stations to offset construction costs, has broken down as the property bubble deflates. Urban megaprojects once envisioned as cities of the future around high-speed stations have turned into ghostly districts of empty apartments and vacant offices. Trains still pass through, but the question remains, do these lines really generate sustainable growth, or are they just a way to turn GDP into concrete? The network also does not stop at China's borders. High-speed rail has become an important part of the Belt and Road Initiative, with lines extending from Kunming into Laos and Thailand, with plans to reach Singapore. Or the Jakarta bonding line in Indonesia, the first of its kind in Southeast Asia built with Chinese technology and financing. Some projects have significantly shortened travel times, but they have also brought debt, cost overruns, and political controversy in the host countries. Seen from Washington, Brussels, or Tokyo, China's high-speed rail network is not just a domestic transport story. It is a new map of power, showing Beijing's ability to export technology, technical standards, and financial influence. A country that buys trains, borrows money, and hires Chinese contractors to build a high-speed line is, in practice, tying itself to that technological and financial ecosystem for decades. Back to the original question for American and European viewers, can this model be copied? To some extent, the answer is no. It is hard to imagine another place combining the same level of centralized power, the same ability to mobilize capital from a state-dominated banking system, and the same willingness to sacrifice the present to bet on the future as China has done. Multi-party political systems, public consultation processes, and federal or union structures in the US and EU slow projects down through negotiation and compromise. But in another sense, the answer is yes, if we understand that the lesson is not build 50,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, but choose the right routes, the right corridors, the right financial models. High-speed rail is extremely efficient on corridors with dense populations, high travel demand, and heavy domestic flight traffic, where trains can directly compete with planes in total door-to-door time and price. Europe is talking about this as it sketches out future networks, and the US could do something similar. It can overcome political and vested interest barriers. As for China, the gigantic high-speed rail network is now a fait accompli. The tracks are laid, the stations are built, the debt has been taken on, and cities have been reshaped around this system. Trains will keep running, stations will stay open, and most people will keep using them because, quite simply, it's the most convenient way to travel long distances inside such a huge country. The real questions China faces in the coming years are no longer should we keep building, but how do we make the best use of what already exists? How do we turn this network into a source of higher quality growth instead of more debt? How do we ensure safety and reliability when the system has become so vast and complex? Those questions are much harder than drawing another line on the map. From a distance, the glowing bands of China's high-speed rail network on the night map are breathtaking, a symbol of speed, connection, and the modernization dream of the world's most populous country. But beneath that beauty lies a development philosophy that is, in many ways, a gamble, accepting big risks, spending enormous sums, changing the physical and social landscape for hundreds of millions of people in exchange for a future they believe will be faster, more connected, and more competitive. Why does China have the largest high-speed rail network in the world? Because this is a place where tracks are not just to steal rails on sleepers, but a straight line connecting growth, power, and a national dream. Whether that dream is sustainable or not is a question that future generations, those still sitting on bullet trains rushing at 300 kilometers per hour, will have to answer.